Hey, good morning, everybody. I see a couple people joining on here. How y'all doing? We'll see if more come on here in a bit before I start talking. It's kind of hard to figure out when they do these live streams. I figure, well, Sunday, most people should be free. And then I think a lot of people that follow me are on the other side of the planet, so they're probably sleeping. So kind of tricky. And we have another one that just joined. Thank you. You have any questions for me? I kind of want to just do a live stream, just kind of open it up to everybody. If anybody's got questions, or of course questions within reason, no weird stuff. Everybody's sleeping in this morning. Hmm. Scariest situation I ever been in. Oh, that's a good one. K. Chapman, 20. Yeah. Do you mean here in Sweden, or do you mean in the United States, I guess, or wherever? I guess I could start with one in Sweden. Scariest situation I've ever been in. It's a big reason why I'm living in this apartment now. Um, I Oh, in life in general. Oh, that's a hard one. Wow. It's hard to say like what's the scariest. I guess I could kind of talk about some of the stuff that's popping into my head now. I can't think of like one specific thing. What I went through about a year and a half ago at my other apartment. I had a guy physically attack me. I was crossing the street. I had right away here in Sweden, and he ended up almost hitting me with his car, and I was like kind of stuck in between. It was like a 4-lane road, and so I kind of tapped on his window so he could, because he wasn't looking at me. He was like looking to the side. So I tapped on his window just to like get his attention, like please don't run over me. Um, I think he was looking at a pretty girl or something down to the right. And I didn't think anything about it. To me, that's just like honking on your horn to let someone know, they're about to run into you or something. And I couldn't back up because now there's already a car behind me, and I was in the crosswalk where you're supposed to be. I did everything that we are supposed to do. And I didn't think much about it. And I just kept walking, and my apartment's like right on the corner there. And then I hear some noise behind me, and I look back, and, I have autism. So I have a hard time judging like body language and understanding what people are saying by their body language, and I thought he was apologizing. So I was just gonna go, "Hey, no problem. It's cool." That's how I am. I don't think the worst of people, and that wasn't his intention. His intention was he was angry at me for knocking on his window with my hand to let him know that I was on the side. And he came up to me and grabbed me by the neck and then my jaw and started like twisting my jaw. And I just froze. And people are just, here in Sweden, in America, like people come up to your aid and be like, get off of him, what's the deal? We're going to call the police, whatever. But it's just like people are just sitting there just eating and drinking, and I'm like hollering, like, hey, call the police or whatever. Well, he just kept like trying to get me to fight, and I wouldn't. That's not my nature. And then, of course, I froze. I'm autistic, so I don't handle stuff like that well. So I just froze like a dead opossum. And so he let me go, and then he just starts like shoving me in the chest like this. And I'm just like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Like, this does not compute. I don't know what to do. And so then he grabbed me again, and then he let me go, and then so he starts like walking backwards to his car that's like parked on the corner. So I pull out my cell phone because I'm still trying to think, like, do I call the police? I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. And as I pull out the phone, he saw me pull out the phone, so he started running after me. And so I managed to get a picture of him just as he was lunging at me, and it has his car with his license plate and everything, and him coming at me. And I had witnesses and everything after this whole incident. He ended up taking off after I started yelling to call the police. Turned it into the police. They did not absolutely nothing. They offered me counseling for trauma, and that was it. Um, so yeah, I found out where he lives. He lives in Eslöv, and some little town there, and he just happened to be passing on through. Yeah. So that's the craziest thing probably here in Sweden. But as I'm telling the story, then I'm sitting here thinking, I actually had this happen to me in Texas, but it was with a gun. There was a 17-year-old kid who was high on methamphetamine in a very nice neighborhood. I was waiting to the side of the street with my sister behind me. We were trying to plan, like, she didn't know the area. This is kind of before GPS, like, was a thing on cell phones and stuff. I had my old flip phone. And so she was gonna follow me, and then there was like a kid coming down the road, and then like he got between our two cars, and uh, he was the passenger, and he hung out the window with a gun like this. And I looked in the window, and I had three other friends with me in the car, and so um, I was like, I told him, like, hang in there, get your seatbelts on, because I'm gonna drive really crazy because the guy's got a gun. Long story short, after he chased me for 2.5 minutes, I finally lost them. And my sister got the license plate. We had lots of witnesses to the whole thing. I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. He was high on methamphetamine, didn't remember anything happened, but they found the gun. They had the fingerprints. They didn't do anything to his friend who chased me in the car because he didn't have the weapon. But the guy with the weapon, they got him and they put him in prison for assault with a rifle. So those are probably the two craziest things that have happened to me in my life. One in Texas and one in Sweden. So yeah, I see what you say here. So that's crazy. Sorry that happened. Yeah, this world is a crazy place, even in Sweden. Ksenia says, "Are you financially satisfied working in Sweden as a nurse compared to America?" It's so funny you say that. I just started a TikTok about 4 weeks ago, just kind of talking about my experiences of being in Sweden as a nurse and that sort of thing. And to be quite honest with you, I'm not really satisfied. I think a lot of promises were made to me when it came to salary. I feel like I've been taken advantage here in this country when with regard to salary because I'm a foreigner and because it's like the knowledge is here. I speak fluent Swedish. I speak Swedish mostly now. Like at work, I don't speak English. I only speak English if I have a patient who can't speak Swedish. I'll speak English with them. But it's like because I'm a foreigner, I feel like I'm being taken advantage of because I have 16 years experience. I'm certified in three things: intensive care, primary care, and diabetes. And I found out from a friend who has been a nurse for 2 years that he is making the same salary as me, and he works for the commune. I work for the hospital, but I'm starting to hear that the hospital pays really bad here, which is kind of strange to me. Um, I figured it'd be the other way around. But I have friends that have the exact same education as me, same years experience, same age as me, and they're making, $1,000 or 10,000 kroner more per month than I am. So, uh, I had that in my mind that that's the money I was going to get. I didn't get it, and so I'm not really so satisfied. So hopefully that answers your question there, Ksenia. Otherwise, um, I think if you're in a relationship with someone and you can share like an apartment or a house, you can have a really good life. But it's difficult for me being a single guy here. Whereas in America, with a nursing salary, you can buy your own house, and have your own place. But then you have a house, but then it's like it's not as pretty. You don't have nature around you. There's not as many activities. You don't have the history like here. It's 47 degrees in the summer, and Celsius, so like 100 and between 107, 111 in the summer times in Texas, and then like in the winter it gets colder than here where I live in Sweden. So yeah. Vikas Pawa says, "Where are you from?" I am from Texas. So I was born in a town called Arlington, Texas, in between Dallas and Fort Worth. And then the last city I was living in was Fort Worth, Texas, before I moved here to Sweden. So yeah. Ksenia, are you working here in Sweden or America as a nurse? I guess, Ksenia, I can talk a little bit more too. I think about the salary. So here in Sweden, there is opportunities to make a lot of money, almost sometimes more than where I came from. Like if you do staff nursing or not staff, what's it called, bemanning scout, which is like you fill in where there's a shortage somewhere in America. It's like travel nursing. Thing is, it's kind of hard for me to get into because I don't have a permanent residency yet. I am here on a work permit with the company I'm with, and it takes 4 years to get the work permit. So I think long term, what would be awesome is to live in Sweden, close to Norway, and then work in Norway and get paid Norwegian salary, and then live in Sweden where it's cheaper. Ksenia says, "Thanks for the reply. I'm also a nurse in Sweden, but I'm getting my license confirmed in the US." Whoa, that's exciting. Cool. There's more and more Swedish people that are getting their licenses in the United States. Lycka till med detta, Ksenia. Wow, that's exciting for you. Do you have a specific state that you're going to want to work in? I've been following two other people on TikTok that are Swedish that live and work um, um, in the United States. K Chapman 20, Arlington. That's where the King of the Hill is from. It's so funny you say that. Yeah. And I know quite a few people that are like that on King of the Hill, including in my family. Good people, but that's a funny show. Lonely Writer 606. Have you spoken to the trade union about your sorry? Yes, I have. We have a representative. I can't remember the name for the technical term for them, but they're the representative for the union for nurses in our department. We're all kind of up in arms about it right now. We had our first strike in 16 years in this part of Sweden, in Skåne. Huge strike, and it was all about salary, nursing burnout, nursing turnover, and how much hours is considered a full-time work week. From what I understand, I've been told that in Scandinavia, Sweden is like the last country that's still working 40 hours is considered full time, and that other places like Denmark and Norway have dropped their hours considerably. And in the end, it didn't help me where I work because I work on Monday to Friday, 8 till 5, basically. It's like 7:30 in the morning until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And here's basically what went down. So when I originally signed up for this job, it was a little tricky because I spent a lot of money to move to this town for this job because I'm specialized in diabetes care. And that's kind of my passion. I did that for the last 4 years. I'm also specialized in intensive care. I'm a nurse practitioner in the United States. So I have a lot of knowledge there and I want to use it as much as I can to help people. And so it was suggested to me that I should move here to this city because where I lived in Helsingborg, the salaries were well, not the salary, sorry, the job, outlook was not so good. It was hard to find those kinds of jobs, and so, a job popped up, and I kinda had to find something last minute because I was risking being, uh, kicked out of Sweden, because my last employer messed up my paperwork. They did not apply for a work permit in time, so I had to turn in my resignation because I had 4 weeks left to stay in Sweden. I had to go back to America, and I didn't have my nursing license yet. So that was a very scary time for me and stressful. And then someone told me about a thing called International Office, and I'm so thankful to them. I wish I would have known about it. But once I found out about that, I reached out to them, and as soon as they saw my CV and my qualifications, they were like, "You need to, um, get this taken care of as soon as possible with your employer, so that we can offer you a position because they can't offer me anything in Sweden if I don't have like a work permit." Because I had what was called like a study permit. So with the study permit, you can study and work in Sweden, but it's not the same thing as a work permit. So I basically had to tell my employer, yeah, I would work for them a little bit more, which did end up doing. I ended up working for them because that was like in April, and I ended up working for them through like July. So for a few more months. And so they gave me a work permit finally after I'd been there for like almost a year. And then I was able to move to Malmo, apply for a job here, and then they couldn't pay me the full salary because I didn't have my license yet. So they paid me as a undersköterska, which is like a nurse aide. And so yeah, so the salary was better than where I was working, and I was real grateful for that. And they said when they offered me the position, they said, "Once you're a nurse, what do you want your salary to be?" And I told them exactly what I wanted it to be based off of what I'd heard. And so I actually went a little bit lower than what some of my colleagues that had the same year's experience and same education as me. I went a little bit lower than that. And they're like, "Well, we can't promise that. We'll do what we can." And I was so desperate because I was about to have to leave the country, if I didn't get this job, and my other job was very unsafe work environment for both me and the patients. And they were getting a lot of bad publicity in the news, and they were all over the newspapers. And there was 100 other nurses from the Philippines risking getting deported from Sweden at that same company because this company was just a really bad place to work. Anyways, um, yeah, so I kind of had to take what I could take, and I didn't have time to do anything else. So I ended up, um, yeah, taking that offer. They couldn't tell me what I would basically get until I got my nursing license. I ended up getting my nursing license. I think like 8 months or 9 months after I started working as a. It was basically like they were using me as a nurse. They were using me in my role, so I was doing the full work that I would do with my nursing license. The only difference was I couldn't sign prescriptions, like for certain things. I can't do prescriptions for medicine, but there are some things I can write, sign off on. I don't want to give too much information, give my company away. But anyways, so yeah, then I was told when I got my nursing license, "Hey, congratulations! Here's your increase in pay. Here's what we're going to give you. We'll give you more once you get your specialist license approved." And they already knew what I was wanting, so I was really hopeful and I was excited. I was like, "Okay, I could stick this out because yeah, y'all are going to give me a raise once I get that." Then I got my license in August, so several months after April. And I turned in and I said, "Hey, you told me that you're going to increase my pay once I turn this in." And so, yeah, let's do it. And I was told, "Yeah, we know we said that, but we can't do it based on the guidelines here." And I'm like, "What?" So I talked to the union about it, and there was nothing they could do. They basically sent the same thing. So basically, I was promised something that should not have been promised. And so I know you can make more money in other stuff, but a lot of reason why I'm in this situation right now is because they sponsored me. They're helping with all the paperwork, and I was risking being kicked out of the country. I was pretty scared because I'd already been stopped by the police 2 times in my other neighborhood. They were checking my ID to see if I had the right to stay here in Sweden. So they do check for that here in Sweden. So that's about the salary thing. Kind of went on there. It was a long answer, a little information dumping there. Let's see if I can catch up with some of these questions here. Um, Maya Helene, does diabetes care differ in Sweden from the United States, or is everything the same? That's a good question. So I think the biggest difference is affordability. So, for example, here in Sweden, people have access to insulin pumps and these really cool insulin pens that are, like Bluetooth and stuff like that. And in America, those are a luxury. We have them. We have really good care in America if you have money. So what ends up happening is people end up having to use the old school, like vial and syringe, because they don't have much money. We do have over-the-counter insulin you can get for really cheap at like Walmart. It'd be like going to ICA and buying some over-the-counter insulin. It's very old insulin. It's Humulin R, and then the NPH insulin you can get in vials in the old-fashioned syringes, which is interesting, because so apparently that is not even done here. As nurses, we can do that for our patients, give that kind of insulin, um, in Sweden. But there was a situation that came up where I had a patient who needed insulin because he ended up having to stay a little bit longer. He was there as an outpatient. And so we just grabbed a vial and a syringe, and I did this with my patients in America. It's no problem, and it's a good teaching moment for them to learn how to give their own insulin. And so I gave it to him. I showed him. I said, we won't be around. It's on our lunchtime. You can eat your lunch and give your insulin because he's like basically in the waiting room. He just needed something to tide him over until his next appointment somewhere else. And he had a panic attack because he'd never used a violent syringe, and I was like shocked. I was like, oh, well, this is like normal. And to me, I think that's kind of scary because it's kind of like, what do you do when the power goes off in your house? You need to know how to work without electronics. You need to know how to. So what if your pen breaks? What if your technology goes bad? You need to have a backup plan. What if, I don't know, the computers are hacked or whatever? So I think that's quite interesting. I think it's a wonderful thing here in Sweden that people have access to so much technology and it's so more affordable here. And so a lot of the diabetes education is around that. But on the downside, I feel like people are very dependent on it and they don't know what to do if something were to go wrong, and they don't have access to those things. The stuff can happen. So I think that's the big differences. Um, I think another thing is attitudes. So, you know, in America, when I try to do diabetes education, a big issue was people just didn't want the education. They didn't want help. They would say, I'm going to live my life. I'm going to die. I'm going to do whatever I want to do. And that does exist a little bit here, but nothing like in the States. And so I found it discouraging when I worked in diabetes in America because I really wanted to help people. And I basically had to tell myself, if I just have one person this week that I make a difference in their life, that makes all my job worth it. But I mean, that's pretty bad to have one patient per week that you're like, oh, I made a difference in this person's life, and you're taking care of patients all day. That we had a lot of people. We called them frequent flyers. They were constantly in the hospital for the same thing, and they know what to do. They just don't do it. But then they get really sick, and then they want us to take care of them. We had a lot of people that would end up in DKA because they wouldn't take their insulin, and each DKA treatment we calculated was $10,000 for a treatment of diabetic ketoacidosis. Um, so I think mental health support is a big issue in America, and mental health is a big issue around diabetes. Whereas I think my impression in Sweden is there's more support when it comes to the burden, the mental, psychological burden of having such a diagnosis. But in America, it's kind of like, man it up, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and just do it. If your family's not a support system, then you just don't have a support system. And let's see what other questions we got. Ksenia, what would you like to bring to Swedish healthcare system from America and vice versa? That's an awesome question. I think long term, I would love to be able to study the differences between the systems in the two countries and see what we can learn from one another. They both have issues. I think one of the things. Well, let's talk about some of the stuff I like about Sweden. So first off, I think the work environment is better and safer than in America. For one, you've got the gun violence issue in America. you're not allowed to bring a gun in the hospital, but people still do it. I've had people hurt by guns. I have a friend who was shot and died, who was a nurse. There was a neighboring hospital that several nurses were shot. I think that's definitely a plus here in Sweden is safety. I think it's awesome that in certain, well, like for example, where I work, we have fika and we have lunch breaks, or they're not necessarily mandatory, but it's pretty much a given that you're going to get it. Whereas in America, you can work a 12-hour shift and you feel guilty for taking a 30-minute lunch break in 12 hours and you get no other break and you have to like pee, but you have to hold it, because people may die and you don't have, a lot of departments here, you have a relief. So if you need to go to the bathroom, you need to do whatever. Let's say if you work in the ICU, you've got that, but it's not the case. So we have patients get hurt, they fall out of the bed or whatever because you went to the bathroom, and there was nobody to watch your patient. That kind of stuff happens. So I think safety is a big thing when I look at what we can do better in America. Stuff I think in Sweden that could be augmented a little bit or optimized is also safety, but it's from a medicinal standpoint. So, for example, in America, all medications are locked up in what's called a Pyxis machine. So, it's a machine that's like an automated dispensing machine, and you can only take out the pill that you're wanting to get. So you type in the patient's name, you search the drug that you want, and a thing pops out, and you take that out. It also keeps track of narcotics, so it's very difficult to steal drugs. We have a really good system there. I worked in pharmacy before as a nurse for 7 years, and I was a narcotics tech, and so I was very familiar with you know the goings on of people trying to steal drugs. In America, we actually had 3 people in 1 year in my department that tried to steal drugs, and it was very hard for them to do that. We have a lot of good systems in place, but I feel like it's much easier for people to take drugs, because it's not as closed of a system. So I think it's easier for people to abuse the system here in Sweden. I also think it's easier to make a medical error and give the wrong medication. Um, I like the charting system that we have in America way better than the one that we have in Sweden. I know people are up in arms right now because we're using an American system in Sweden and it's terrible because they're going to go to that here in Sweden. And they already have implemented it in some places. But from what I'm hearing, the system that they bought, because they were stingy, they bought a cheap system from the 90s, is what I was told. So, of course, you can't say the American charting system is bad. It's like, what system are you using and how old is it? But the system we had at my hospital was amazing. We had, like, for example, shortcuts. So if you're going to type something and you're going to type the same thing over and over, you don't have to type it all out. You can create short codes where you just type in like dot and then, like, for example, dot om, and that would be for omlegging or dressing changes. So like um, dot om could mean change your dressing 2 to 3 times a week based on the amount of fluid that comes out of the wound, instead of having to type that every single time. So there's a lot of really cool things that we have like that. It's very easy to pull up pictures of wounds and to access those. We don't have a whole bunch of different systems that aren't communicating with each other. Like here in Sweden, you have a lot of different computer systems that you have to use. So I think things are just streamlined better when it comes to the technological perspective. But part of that has to do with we have a lot of pressure in the United States from insurance companies to get on board with certain systems, and so I think that's good. Another thing I think is good is um, we have a lot of competition from all the hospitals. So it's like, and this is a very sensitive topic. I know when I use the word customer service, people get bent out of shape here in Sweden about that. And like, you're a patient, you're not a customer. But on the other end of that, the patients actually give surveys about how they experience the care in the hospital. Also, the patient outcomes in America are accessible to the general public. And so, as a customer or patient, they can go in and they can look at these. So if they want to have a major surgery, they can look at, okay, this hospital had a certain percentage of infection and this one had a certain percentage of infection. So I want to go with this one, or this one has better management of pain, that sort of thing. Whereas I've been trying to get my hands on certain data here, like urinary tract infections, and it's like pulling teeth trying to get access to that data. So I think those are some of the differences. I think there is a lot of good things here in Sweden that I really appreciate, but I think the biggest thing is just access of data, and I think the technological perspective to increase patient safety and nurse safety, and to kind of streamline the work that we do as nurses. So, well, I've got a few questions here. Let me catch up here. We've got um, Lonely Rider 606. What do you think will happen to patients in the USA now when Trump will do cuts in healthcare system? I'm really concerned, to be honest. Lonely Rider 606. I have no idea. It's hard to know. Um, the president has only a certain amount of power. We have three branches in the political system. So the president can't just say something like an emperor or a king. You know, there are checks and balances. So it's really hard to know. I have no idea. And we'll just have to hang in there for the next 4 years, I guess. Let's see. Sipto de Napoleon. How is your life going? Married, and who did you vote? So I don't really want to talk too much politics. I prefer not to do that on this platform for the obvious. Um, and then married, no, not married, no kids or anything like that, which kind of made it difficult coming here to Sweden, because I didn't. That's typically what people do when they come to Sweden. They have a relationship with somebody, and so it makes it easier for them to come here. How is life going for me? I'm kind of in a rut right now. A little bit of funk. You go through that in life. Sometimes you have your ups and downs, and I think the biggest thing right now is financially. I'm not where I want to be, and I'm concerned about my financial future. I could make a lot in America if I went back, but I'm fulfilling a lifelong dream, which was to live abroad, have that experience. My dear grandmother, who passed away several years ago, she lived in Germany. She was an American, lived in Germany for several years, loved it, lived in England, loved it. And it was so cool to hear her stories. I'm like, I want to have that. I want to be an old man and look back at my life and be like, I tried this and that, and not have any regrets. I'm like, if it goes bad, I can always go back to America. Um, but right now it's been really tough. Right now, I spent a lot of money coming here to Sweden, more than I expected. It was harder to come into the system than I expected. Um, so just hanging in there right now. Right now, I'm just trying to take it a day at a time. I'm going to turn this light down because it's kind of bright here. There we go. That's better. That was a little too bright for me. Let's see. Sipto de Napoleon. Hope you live good. Oh, thank you so much. I will say this. This apartment, this is like, I have to pinch myself sometimes. I'm like, I feel so spoiled living here because I'm like, I'm in Limham now, so I live by the water. So I can just walk down to the water down there. I've never lived in such a nice place in my life. It's kind of expensive, and it's hard to get an apartment here where I live. There's a lot of people, um, in the city, and so there's a shortage of apartments. So I had to pay like an extra roughly $190 a month to get this apartment. But to me, it was worth it because where I was living, where it was cheaper, there's a lot of crime. Like I said, I got attacked that one day. There's shootings over there. People get robbed. I don't know. A lot of people are like, well, if you want to save money, improve your financial situation, then you need to sell your car. Because I have the old jalopy, 2006 Honda that's paid for, I paid cash for, and done work on it and stuff. And, all this kind of stuff. But it's kind of like when you start doing that, then you're kind of like defeating the whole purpose of like why you came to Sweden. I came here for not just live in Sweden, but there's a certain lifestyle that I wanted, which is to be able to go out in nature. It's hard to do that with collective traffic. With the bus system here is very limited when it comes to, if I want to go for a walk in the woods, and I'm not talking a city park. I'm talking go out and get in nature where the lakes are and stuff. You have to have a car. That's just the way it is, and it's expensive to rent a car. So, because that's on my YouTube channel, I like to do a lot of content creation with videos of nature and stuff like that. And it's kind of hard to do that. So, if you don't have a vehicle, so having a car costs a lot of money. So, like, I have a parking garage, and and there's nowhere else to park here where I'm at. So the parking garage is costing me like $120 a month or 1,200 kroner a month, which is ridiculous. Then I have to pay for parking at the hospital, which is like another $70 a month or 700 kroner a month for just like a regular parking out in a muddy field. So that's like a whole car payment itself. So it's tough. I do have. Oh, thank you, Sibto de Napoleon. Yeah, the apartment where I'm at right now, it's pretty awesome. It's built in 2019, so it's white painted walls. The walls are pretty well insulated. I can still hear a little bit through the walls, but it's nothing like where I was living before, where I was at before. Yeah, like I said, I was saving $190 a month in the other place, but it was a sublet, so it was somebody else's apartment that was rented out to me because it's hard to get apartments here in Sweden, and you could hear everything through the walls. I could hear when they cough. I could hear when they sneeze. They had tons of children above me running around, and the whole room would shake. I'm sitting there trying to like record a YouTube video, and you could hear people on the video running from upstairs. There's a lot of crime in the area, so it's tough here in Malmo. I came here for work. I was living in Helsingborg, and it's a bit cheaper there, but the type of work that I do is kind of difficult. Cito de Napoleon looks like a White House. Yeah. Yeah, they like their white stuff here. It's freshly painted white walls in here, and which is really nice in the wintertime. You need it. I mean, seriously, it's so dark here in the wintertime. Um, and that can be a challenge for some people living here in the wintertime with the darkness that we have here. Where are you from, anyways, Cito de Napoleon? Did you get new paint smell? They are really good about doing safe stuff here in Sweden, so I actually didn't have any problem with um, like strong smells or anything like that. So it was kind of crazy though, because you have to get on a waiting list here in a lot of the big cities in Sweden. I had to wait, over a year for this apartment to pop up. So I'd applied for several ones, and then this one popped up. So it cost more than it was more than my amount of money I wanted to spend, but I had to take something just to have like my own apartment that's not sublet, and if I can always move later on to something cheaper if I find something else. But my dream is to find a tiny little cottage out in the woods, and then drive into the city for work. And then, I used to do construction when I was younger, and so I remodeled houses on the side in America. So I'd love to do that here too as well. Um, so anyway, so I got this apartment, and nothing was done on it. Like they hadn't even cleaned the apartment. I was like, "What?" I come in, the floor is dirty. The walls look like someone been smoking cigarettes. So I called them, I was like, "Y'all are gonna have to do something about it." So I had all my furniture here, and then they were having to like repaint around my furniture. So it was kind of crazy, but there was no weird smells. Lonely Rider 606. If I may ask, have you found Swedish friends? If yes, was it hard to find? Are friendships different than the US? Love this question. Yeah, I do have friends here. Lots of friends. I have Swedish friends. I've got friends from other cultures. I have people that are, their parents are from other places, but they were born here in Sweden. So I've got some really good support here. Um, when it comes to, was it hard to find? Yes and no. I think a lot of it depends on where you live. So some cities tend to be more friendly. Where I was in Helsingborg, people were more closed off and private. So I had people that I had known for years, and I lived down the street from them, and I only got to see them like, two times in a year. Like even one of my closest friends I moved here to Sweden for, I hardly ever saw him. Him and his wife, they're real sweet people, but it's just like they have their family, they have their close friends they've been with forever, so they kind of do their own thing. And I'm not married, and they're married, so they usually invited other married people, and so I felt a little bit yeah, left out sometimes about that. Um, when it comes to other friendships different here, I think the friendships are easier to be more deep here in Sweden compared to in the States. I think in the States it's all about, and there's always exceptions, right? This isn't in every case, but I feel like in America it's all about what you're doing. Like we need to go bowling, and then we need to go watch a movie, and then we need to go shopping, and then and if you don't have a plan like that, then it's kind of like, okay, well, I guess I'm gonna go home because there's nothing else to do. Whereas in Sweden, people are like, they'll just sit around and drink a cup of coffee and, look out at nature and talk and enjoy each other's company. I like that a lot better. There's not as much pressure to perform. There's not as much pressure to spend a lot of money. Uh, and I think once you do make good friends, even though people are pretty private and stuff here in Sweden, I think once you make good friends, um, they're more affectionate. They're more yeah, I don't know. I just feel like they use the analogy a lot for Swedish versus Americans of peaches versus coconuts, and say Swedish are like coconuts, hard on the outside, soft on the inside. Americans are like soft on the outside and hard on the inside. So I think there's some truth to that. um, so Sibto di Napoleon, you're from Old Jersey. So when you say Old Jersey, I assume you mean, is that in the UK? And then Agnetha Jensen, what is your job currently? I currently work as a nurse, specializing in diabetes. So that's what I'm doing currently. And Cito di Napoleon, but wooden house beside a lake, cutting woods and selling them and hunting for food. Would you like this type of life? Dude, that's my dream right there. I'll tell you my dream. My dream here in Sweden, I had this picture in my mind. And one reason I live here in Malmö is it's purely to come into the system. I'm not going to stay in this area. But my dream is once I've come into the system, I have permanent residence, which is going to take, I don't know, 2.5 more years, maybe 2.5 years. My dream is to have a little tiny house, either that I build myself or an old one that I restore on a lake in the middle of nowhere. And every morning I wake up and I have windows facing like a little pond or the lake, and you see like the fog rolling in, and it's nice and cold outside. And I walk up with my cup of coffee and, enjoy looking out the trees and the birds, and have like a little greenhouse and, yeah, a little wood fireplace. I don't need much, I really don't. But that's kind of my long-term goal. Hopefully I can get to that point here in Sweden. I think that's another thing that's affecting my mood lately, is because it's harder to achieve those goals than I expected it was going to be. I've seen a lot of people on YouTube and stuff that have done something like that, and they did it in a short period of time. It seems like it was easier for them, to like acquire a piece of land or come into the Swedish system. But I think one of the biggest issues is for them is they're European, and so it's easier for them to move to Sweden, or they already live in Sweden and they're able to do those things. But me coming from outside the EU, it's a lot harder to get that dream. So hopefully I'll get there. That's my long term goal. So Agnetha Jensen, you were asking about my job. Are you what kind of work do you do? Do you work in healthcare as well? And sorry, I had a cold last weekend, so I'm like sniffing and everything. I apologize ahead of time for that. I still feel, how it is when you're sick for like 2 weeks after you have the post cold, man flu. Kind of back to what you were saying on Sipto di Napoleon about the renting and stuff. I think that's probably the most common thing here in Sweden is people rent. That's kind of that's just the thing here. It's really hard to get buy a house in the city where I live. I hear there are places up north. I've actually looked online. You can actually buy houses for really cheap. I've heard of and seen houses that are like up in the woods in the middle of nowhere for like the price of a used car. um, so yeah, we'll see. Maybe I can do that. So, y'all have any more questions for me? Anything about Sweden or anything, or the states? Really nice getting to chat with y'all today. By the way, Zito D Napoleon. Where did you get your name from? That screen name. Just gonna go through my questions here and make sure I've answered everything. Let's see. Surprised I've already been on here for almost 50 minutes. Ksenia, in Norway, you can get permanent residency after 3 years of work. Have you thought about? Is it only 3 years, Ksenia? That is fascinating. Okay, I'll tell you what. So I love Norway. I wouldn't mind moving there, honestly. But one of the biggest reasons why I chose Sweden is I want EU citizenship, so that I don't know what the future is for me. I would love to get my PhD in nursing, and so sometimes opportunities open up, say, for example, in Germany or France or whatever. And I want that powerful citizenship to be able to, if say a research position opened up in, say, Germany or something, I could just move there. Uh, Norway, it's not part of the EU, and so that was kind of a concern for me. And I thought I can always get it in Sweden, and then I can move to Norway later. I think it's easier doing it that way. The other thing was it costs so much to live in Norway, so the salaries are good, but then the cost of living is very high. I was actually dating a girl from Norway, from Bergen, very short term. We're still friends and everything like that, but I think the issue there was she has a son, and she's not able to move from there. And I don't want to live in Bergen. It rains. It's like the rainiest city. I think it would affect my mental health if I had to be there. And I think she would love to move to Sweden, but she's currently not in a situation where she can do that. So, but yeah, Norway is a beautiful place. I've been there a couple times. I actually drove all the way to Bergen from Sweden in my old jalopy Honda, and all the way back, and it's just such a special place. Yeah, would love to be there. The other thing too is I heard it's changing, but I heard that when I was trying to come to Sweden, you can't have dual citizenship if you're an American. You have to like have one or the other. Costs a lot of money to do away with American citizenship, then I would risk also losing my Social Security I've paid into all these years, which I'll need. I have another 20 or so years I work before retirement. I don't want to like throw all that away. I don't know, although that's like really complicated, and I don't have the money for a lawyer to work through all that with me. So, but it's definitely a possibility, I would say. I'll keep that back here and back in my mind on the back burner. Uh, let's see, Lonely Rider 606. Many people that end up in the north only stays for a while because they're not used to the cold weather and the darkness and loneliness. Have you ever lived in the woods? Believe it or not, Lonely Rider 606, I have. I lived in Alaska. You can look up on the map. There's a town called Soldotna with 4,000 people in the middle of nowhere. There was only one other town with like 4,000 people called Kenai that was half an hour away. And then after that, there's nothing. These little teeny tiny, not even villages. They're just like little communities of like 100 or less people. We have wild bears, we have moose. Loved it. Loved it so much. I would have loved to stay, but the issue you get into there is work, right? So I wasn't able to extend, and something happened. I had to go back home to take care of some family business. Um, Salary was actually a little bit low where I was working, which is kind of weird, but it was a travel nurse company. I think they were kind of taking advantage of me. Um, I was getting $31 an hour, working night shift in the intensive care and working overtime and everything, and just getting 31 an hour. I wasn't a staff employee, so I didn't have health insurance or anything like that. No sick days, no vacation days, nothing. And so, yeah, it was kind of tough, but I loved it. Lived in a tiny little bitty cabin. I mean, the thing was smaller than this apartment. I mean, the cabin was probably the size of my living room in this apartment here, and I just was really enjoying being out there. So yeah, that is not a problem. The cold's not a problem. I was used to, there were days it was like, minus 25, minus 27, like in the winter time there, Celsius. Ksenia, Sweden is tightening the rules for obtaining citizenship from 2026. It will take 8 years like Norway. That's interesting. Do you think it's going to affect me? Like, am I grandfathered in? Do you think? I wonder how that'll work. Like, once you're already here and in the system, can you count back the time? Because if that's not the case, then maybe I do need to look at some other options. That's kind of concerning. I really glad you said something about that. Um, I know it's crazy because, like, I've watched these things about like golden visas and stuff where people that are rich can just buy citizenship in like Portugal. They can like buy an apartment and after like a few years and they have citizenship. And I just think that's just crazy. I came here because I wanted to make a difference. I heard there was a big need for nurses in Sweden, and so I came here, and it's like I had to pay out of my pocket for a lot of stuff. There are companies in other countries that will sponsor you, and they'll pay for your move and everything like that. And then Sweden has such a huge need for nurses and doctors, and there's no such thing. There's no like for example, Canada and England, they have like a list of like the top like skill workers that they need, and so they have a process to get people in that are educated to fill those needs. And I'm just like, um, yeah, it's weird they don't have that in Sweden because we're hurting so bad for skilled professionals here in Sweden. Ksenia, you're saying yes, it will probably affect me. The changes with the citizenship. Oh, that stinks, man. Yeah, because I think right now it's like 5 years, I believe. Which the thing is, I've already been living in Sweden for 3.5 years, and so my plan was apply for permanent residency. So I have a work permit right now, and I was going to apply for the extension in October. And then they said after that runs out, which 2 years after October, then I can apply for permanent residency. Um, and then the thought was then a year after that, then I can apply for citizenship. So yeah, I'll just have to keep my eyes on that. I'm glad you kind of said something about that. And then Ksenia, you say in Norway, on the contrary, there are many agreements with European Union also concerning education. I'll do a little research on that, Ksenia. You've kind of perked my interest a little bit. Uh, Really good stuff. I can't remember if you said in the comments already, Ksenia. Are you from Norway or living in Norway? I can't remember. Sorry, I have a hard time remembering, juggling everything. Okay, Dada Knut, what is your life in 10 years, living place, working task, and what do you think you will think when you look back 10 to 15 years? Wow, a lot to that question, Dada Knut. That is something I think a lot about. I don't think I've really got a good, concise answer yet. I've still been exploring that. I think long term, I want to look back and be proud of what I've done. I want to be remembered, which is kind of one reason I'm doing a YouTube channel is I want something to be remembered by. Um, That's something for some reason, I don't know, that's my own, what do they call that? Existential crisis that I'm dealing with right now. And I think a lot of us deal with some sort of existential crisis. So that's kind of my own little thing I've been battling with the last few years is becoming aware of my own mortality and all that sort of thing. I think I would love to do something really special in this world that makes a big difference that people will remember in a positive way. Um, Not really sure what that would be yet. When it comes to like where I would live, I love Europe. I think the thing is for me, I love my mother so much. My father just passed away this summer unexpectedly, pretty young age. My mom's still pretty young, but she's got her own health problems, and I would like to spend time with her before she's you know not with us anymore. I've seen so many situations in my family, like my extended family, and in other people's lives where they're just so busy they don't spend time with their family and their loved ones, and then it's too late and they regret it. So it's like, but then at the same time, you can't sit around and wait for people to not be with us anymore either. You have to live your life. So finding that balance is really tough. Um, so I would like to be in a situation where I'm living in Europe, but I can easily like maybe be my own business owner and live here, but then travel frequently back and forth to America as many times as I want to see my mother and my family and get Mexican food. The thing that I miss the most about living in Sweden is the Mexican food. If I had all the money in the world, I would probably open a Mexican restaurant here with authentic Mexican food and invite some of my friends that cook Mexican food from the United States to come here and work with me in a restaurant. I miss Mexican food so much. I have dreams about it. But anyways, yeah, that I think is a big deal for me is being able to have that freedom to travel whenever back home. Um, I'll see what else in 10 to 15 years. Yeah, I would like to be debt free, no debt, have a house that's paid for, be able to afford, a new car every 10 years, afford to go on a decent vacation once each year, have two kids, married, a garden, out in nature, just a quiet, nice life with the ability to be able to travel and eat Mexican food. Have a greenhouse to grow my own jalapeno peppers and chilies and stuff like that. Data Knut, nice answer. Please cut out this comment and keep in a map to watch 2035. Yeah. All right. Sure. Lonely Rider 606. Think twice before leaving Scandinavia. I know right now it's so crazy because I was really worried about with what's going on right now in Europe, the whole thing with Ukraine and Russia, and we're not that far from all that's going on. And so I was very concerned about security here in Sweden. And so I had already told people at work, I said, if war comes here, I have no family here. I'm not a citizen here. I'm not a permanent resident here. It only makes sense that I'm with my mother. I don't want to be stressing my family out, my brother and my sister, and my mom, with me being over here if war comes here. I've only lived, like I said, I don't really have a lot of ties here yet. I don't have any family here. I'm not a citizen. I don't have permanent residency. It just would make sense to be there. And then now we've got what we've got happening in America, and now I'm like, well, I come from Texas, and if a war happens with Mexico and they start sending people over there, and I'm like right there, so I'm just like, I don't know, what the future holds for us right now. It's a little scary right now, to be honest. I try not to think about it too much. I think you can't bury your head in the sand about stuff like this, but at the same time, you can't you can't live your life worrying all the time. You've gotta, yeah. I'm just trying to take it a day at a time for now. Let's see. Lonely Rider 606. FYI, the health system in Germany has changed for the worse. Many nurses and doctors are leaving for other countries. Everyday living costs like rent and food has skyrocketed. You are absolutely right. I'm very concerned. Um, Something I'm seeing here in Sweden is a shortage of resources. We've had discussions about that we should not use so many gloves. I'm like, I'm taking care of wounds and bodily fluids, and y'all are having conversations about reduce how many gloves that we use. Like, I looked up the cost because I was curious, and I found out per set of gloves, according to the site that I looked at that was connected with where I work. One pair of gloves is the equivalent of like 2 cents, 2 American cents. I'm like, and we're talking about saving money by, and they're talking about saving money on paper. And I'm like, but for patient security reasons, so you don't mix up your patients, you have to have a piece of paper because we're not fully electronic like in America. In America, you wear a barcode and you scan the barcode and then everything's connected to that. But it's like we're still very reliant on paper. And you're telling us to like, we just had to remember it all in our head. So yeah, it's crazy stuff right now happening here in Europe. And then like groceries, trying to eat healthy. I'm trying to lose weight. I'm trying to eat more vegetables, and like I'm like looking at celery, and it was like 30 kroners, for it wasn't even organic celery. You can buy food cheaper at stuff like Luku Foods and some other places, but the thing is, it's so far from me. I just have like a local co-op and then like a ICA, and I walk there to buy all my groceries, and it's expensive. Let's see. I don't want to miss your comments. I'm getting so many good comments and questions. Let's see. Um, Dada Knut, when you watch Swedish media and main people's opinion about U.S. Texas, do Swedish people think do Swedish people have a good and correct understanding about the United States? If not, what things do Europeans miss? Yeah, good question. I think there is almost like a caricature of what it is to be an American and what America is. I think one thing I'm starting to see now is I think things are a little bit exaggerated. One of the comments that I get from a lot of people in Sweden is we have absolutely no healthcare in America, or that the healthcare in Sweden is so much better than America. And I'm like, uh, well, like, how do you tackle that? So, for example, yeah, I think the big issue in America is the cost is just ridiculous. But I think people think that if you don't have money, that you will not be treated as a patient in America, and it's not true because ethically, we have to take a vow when we're a nurse or a doctor that we will do no harm and we will be ethical, and so we don't do that. What ends up happening really is, I think it's the chronic care. It gets to be a problem. So, for example, we have people that are homeless. I mix up my Swedish and my English here. Homeless. Yeah, people that are homeless in America, which is a huge problem in America right now, and it's getting worse. They may not have access to a refrigerator to store their insulin. So what do we do about that? So we can give them the best care in the hospital. The other thing is, then why are they homeless? Well, that's not really a healthcare situation. That's more of a society problem. So the hospital can't do anything. I'll have a funny story. I have to tell you this funny story. Whoa, I'm gone over an hour. I'll talk a little, maybe I can cut this off in about 15 minutes here, but I have a funny story. So when I worked in the hospital in America, we have a team, a healthcare team called case management. So what they do is they make sure that a patient is safe to go home and they have everything that they need to keep them from coming to the hospital again, which means they have the prescriptions. They know where to get the prescriptions. If they can't afford it, then they get set up with like Catholic charities. We have things like that in America. They make sure that they have all if they need a cane or a walker or a wheelchair, that there's a nurse that's going to be set up, that they have a follow up appointment with a physician. We don't really do that where I work. And so I do see in Sweden, a lot of people fall through the cracks here in Sweden too, because there is no like career person that's their career where they bridge the gaps. I think that would be helpful here in Sweden to have some sort of navigator to help people. The problem is too, then it's also on the patient too. So you can set up all that stuff and then they don't come to their doctor's appointment because they just don't want to. They're not trying to stop smoking. They're not trying to reduce their, drug abuse. They're not, you give them access to resources, but they're just not at that point in life where they want to do that kind of thing. But I think those are real things that you see in Swedish media that we do need to do something about. But it's not that we don't have healthcare at all. It's there. I think the problems are very complicated. It's a huge land with a third of a billion people, with 50 states that are each like their own country, most of them with more population than Sweden. So it's very hard to implement a system like in Sweden where you have 10.5 million people. It's much easier to do that here. So we have really good technology. We have a lot of resources there. I think the issue is the cost really is a problem. Um, and then we've got some societal issues, such as we've got a lot of issues with, lack of access to healthy food. We have food deserts where there's no, people choose to eat McDonald's because that's what's there. It may be hard to get access to something else. It may work two jobs and they're too tired to cook, and so they're going to eat fast food, and then that leads to diabetes, obesity, and heart trouble, and then they're not home for the kids, and so then that leads to more issues. So I think there is a lot of truth to stuff that you see in the media, but I think it is caricaturized a bit. So hopefully that answers your question. Um, Okay, data connect. In my opinion, after watching some YouTube videos, I got a feeling we don't understand how the society works. In politics, we have so different built up societies, so we cannot understand why healthcare, same. Yeah, yeah, no, I think you're right. I think the best way really to understand something is you almost have to go there. You can also look at data and statistics, but one of the things that I'm finding frustration with in Sweden is a lack of transparency. I think America is more transparent. If you want to find something, this is my experience. Maybe I'm wrong. I will humbly admit I could be wrong. I think there's a lack of transparency in Sweden, and I think one of the things that's driving that right now, from what I've been told when I've talked to people I work with, is um, what do they call that? Secretess or tystnadsplikt, which has to do with patient information. And so they're like, no, you have to have certain access and authority to get access to this data. Like, for example, urinary tract infections. I had people say, there's so many urinary tract infections in America, blah blah blah, and then I'm like, all I could find when I looked it on Google, and I even used ChatGPT. ChatGPT even said it's very difficult to find any data in Sweden on these outcomes. So it's like you have to have some sort of hookup and know somebody that works in these areas to get access to this data. But all I could find was an article from 2016 at the hospital where I work at, and it was of a stroke department researching two different types of catheters, and it said that the incidence of urinary tract infections it was roughly, I don't remember exactly, but it was roughly about 25% of patients with a catheter got a urinary tract infection. Like, that's pretty bad. One out of every four people got a urinary tract infection in that department. That was 2016. Things could be different. Here or in America, where I worked, we actually created a very strict system for insertion of catheters. It could only be a nurse. It had to be two nurses doing it. So if one did something wrong, the other says, no, you can't do that. We need to get another catheter and start again, or to go get extra materials so that you didn't contaminate the sterile field. And we had departments that actually cut infection rates to near zero. Did the same thing with ventilator-associated pneumonia. We created those kinds of protocols. Central line-associated infections. We decreased that drastically because of these protocols. And you can access all that on the internet. And a lot of it's because of insurance. So there's a dark side to insurance, and there's a bright side. The bright side being that a lot of this data is accessible because, and this is another thing, is the whole customer versus patient. In America, the mentality is yeah, they're a patient, but they're also a customer, and so we want the customer to be satisfied, happy, and feel safe, and we want good reviews. And so, whereas here in Sweden, it's hard for a person to be a customer and shop around and look at data and outcomes, and make a choice. They kind of have to take what's given to them. Whereas, like the city I lived in was just under 1 million people. We had 4 hospitals right on one block, all different companies, and you could look up the data of all of them and decide which to go to. And then to increase income of the hospitals, that gave us incentive to increase our productivity, decrease our spending, and increase, for example, infections, improve outcomes. So that's the positive side of it. I'm not saying I'm pro privatization. I'm not saying I'm pro insurance. None of that. I'm just saying, um, that was one of the silver linings to the cloud, I guess. But we've got some serious problems in America when it comes to the costs. It's just ridiculous. The other thing that I think is a problem in America with healthcare right now is the fact that, um, those demands are so high to improve our outcomes that it creates a burden on those of us that work in healthcare systems. So you get a lot of nurses that they do it for 5 to 20 years, and they can't do it for a lifetime career because they get burnt out because the demands are so high on these outcomes. I have an example. I ended up. Oh, sorry, I'm getting sidetracked. I went off on a tangent. Sorry, autistic here, so I do info dump sometimes. I said I had a funny story. I'll tell you that one. Back to the case management thing. So I had a guy who was homeless. He had a little camper trailer next to a pile of dirt. He had diabetes, and he got admitted to the hospital for out of control blood sugar. He had diabetic ketoacidosis, and so we had the case manager talking with him and was like, "So what's your barrier to like being able to manage your diabetes?" And he said, "I need a hoe." Where do you think my mind went? And I'm there with the case manager. I'm like, he needs a hoe. So we asked a few more questions. They say, yeah, I got snakes inside my camper trailer. So I live in a tent outside the camper trailer next to the pile of dirt. So I have a refrigerator inside the camper to put the insulin in, but I need a hoe to chop the snakes. And I'm just like, oh, when we had daily meetings, on patients, like why they were still in the hospital, what could we do to get them home, make sure they don't come back. Preventable readmissions is what we call that in the States. And so, which I don't even know if we do that in Sweden. Let me know if we do that here in Sweden, but we have a thing called preventable readmissions. We try to reduce those. So anyways, so when they were like, well, what's his barrier to, staying out of the hospital? And we're like, he needs a hoe. Somebody buy the man a hoe, poor guy. I don't know what the case manager ended up doing because that was her role. That's her responsibility. Mine was teaching him about diabetes management. So now let's see here. Let me do some catching up on these comments here. Uh, it's little like Americans just eat unhealthy. Oh, this is data note. It's little like Americans just eat unhealthy food or so helpless and just think of their self opposite of Yantalagan, and that is the big difference. Yeah, there's truth to what you're saying. Absolutely. But I think it is caricaturized. I think what's happened now with social media and things like this kind of platform, I think it becomes an echo chamber. And I think it also makes things appear worse than that they actually are. Um, and I think there's issues in both systems. I mean, for example, eating unhealthy is a problem in Sweden too. But the case of being unhealthy in Sweden, I feel, is less here than in America, and I think it's very complicated reasons. And it varies from state to state. For example, at one time, I don't know if it's still the case, Hawaii was the healthiest state, and when you go there, it's like people do not look like your typical American. I think it's because the weather's great, you're outdoors and all that kind of stuff, and a certain lifestyle that comes with that. But coming from Texas, it's freezing cold in the winter sometimes and burning hot, and people die in the summer because it's so hot, even with air conditioning. Because then the power grid fails and then it's hot in your house, and so people die. So what people do, they stay inside and they play video games because it's too hot outside. We have some pretty places in Texas, but if you're going to go there, for example, if I was to go to Austin, just outside Austin, there is a beautiful area there, but it's 3.5 hours. That costs money, time, gas. And so what do people do for fun? Well, there's nothing pretty to look at. So you go eat and you go to the movies. So here in Sweden, I just walk out the door and the water's right there and I go for a walk. We don't really have that in America. So I think, yeah, I think it's a very complex thing, very complicated, a lot to unpack. So, well, guys, I've rambled long enough. This was a lot of fun. I needed to get in the habit of doing this more often. These live streams, it's pretty fun. It's good for me too. I get a lot of benefit out of this. So yeah, thank you guys for chatting. I think I'm gonna go ahead and close it up now. Hey, Ksenia. Yeah, thank you as well. Appreciate you hanging out with us here. Thank you, Deda Knut, for all your really cool questions, and I've really enjoyed talking with you. So yeah, maybe we'll see again here on this platform. So y'all take care of yourselves. Have a wonderful rest of your day. You're welcome, Patricia, Ruth. Take care of yourself. Bye.